Okay, so today was a big day for the Trump legal case. As I said the day after the election, we're not going to know who the ultimate winner will be for a long time. And in fact, there may not be an ultimate winner because the way things are looking more and more, um, in a state, in certain states like Pennsylvania, it's very clear that uh, the strategy of the Trump campaign is to try and really hammer home, that their observers in Pennsylvania and so many other states were not permitted to observe the canvassing and the ballot counting, and that therefore, whatever ballots that they were not able to be legally observed were not therefore not legally processed and counted, and so therefore they should be thrown out because there's no way now to go back and redo that process. You can't recheck because these are secret ballots, and so if they're mail-in ballots that come in envelopes, you have to see the envelope, that ballot is connected to, and you would have to. Um, I mean, once the ballot and the envelope is opened, there's no going back. And so now the only way to sort of remedy that would be to invalidate all those ballots. But I think in a couple other states, notably Michigan, um, things might take an even more extreme turn in the courts. And the reason why I say that is because in Michigan they have a signed affidavit from a poll worker who was involved in the ballot counting when Republicans were not observing. So this is a window into what was going on when Republicans were not allowed in or allowed close enough to see what was going on. And this poll worker, they were instructed by their supervisor to count ballots which were very clearly invalid. And when she said, hey, or he, I can't remember if it's a she or he, said to their supervisor, hey, this ballot really does, it doesn't pass the smell test. We should not count this. They said count it anyway. And this person seems like a pretty credible witness. You can pretty easily confirm whether they actually did work in that position or not. And I think that this is even more damning evidence than just the fact that the Trump campaign and the Republicans were not allowed to observe in a lot of these states. I mean, that's not something that you do when you have a free and fair election. That's one of the basic tenets of having a free and fair election, is having that be open and to where you have observers from all involved parties and even outside international observers that they make a lot of these African countries do. Having an open and transparent um, election process is what separates a banana republic from a so-called stable democracy or a developed democracy, whatever whatever the term is. I can't remember what the political science term is. A mature democracy, something like that. And so we in the United States do not, at least in these certain states or these certain cities, we don't live up to that standard. Now, when we just know that Republicans were not let in, that leaves a lot to the imagination. We don't know if there was anything bad going, on behind closed doors or not until we heard from this witness. And this witness coming forward and actually, stating outright, what they saw going on behind closed doors in the city of Detroit, I think could actually be used as grounds to try and have the entire election overturned, because this is not just proof that the process was potentially fraudulent and that it was not a free and fair election and that observers were illegally denied access. This would be evidence that the election, very well might have been stolen. And as we know, from that congressional race not too long ago in North Carolina, we have had elections invalidated and then rerun. We've had a revote before because of credible fraud. And so we're not just looking at ballots being thrown out which were not properly observed in certain states. I think that a revote is on the table in certain states, certainly in Michigan, after what I've seen, especially if, let's say, more poll workers start coming forward and signing affidavits saying that they were a part of this and that they saw what was going on behind closed doors, literally behind closed doors. Perhaps then, once they start ratting on their superiors, this will work its way up the chain, and we'll see just how far up this whole conspiracy, to the extent that there is one, goes. Because again, at this point, if you assume that there's fraud, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was coordinated by the DNC or by any sort of interstate organization. It could just be that the people in all these jurisdictions are corrupt, and they knew that they're in important states, and so if they can, they're going to try and defraud Trump and help out Joe Biden. There doesn't have to be a conspiracy between the people in Clark County and Philadelphia County and Allegheny County and Wayne County and Milwaukee County. All of those places are, corrupt Democrat machine-run counties. I mean, they rigged their local elections, which in Philadelphia, very recently, in like the last year or two, a judge was convicted of, taking bribes from local Democrats to help them rig an election. And so if these cities rig their local elections, then sure, they're going to rig the national election if they think that it's a close race and that they can, swing things in their state. And so, probably, I mean, I'm sure that if hundreds of thousands of votes had to be thrown out because of what these people did, that Democrats would not take that lying down, and they would certainly feel disenfranchised. So, I mean, you could argue that the best case scenario for everyone on both sides is that we just have a revote in these states to ensure, with proper oversight, of course, and observers, to ensure that the election is conducted properly, to ensure that, the election is actually free and fair. Because to me, from what I've seen, and who knows, they could lose their court case still. I don't know the ins and outs of the law. Obviously, I don't know what judges they'll be in front of, although I guess all these cases are going to make their way up to the Supreme Court eventually. And we don't have much time. The Electoral College meets on December 14th. So if this stuff is not sorted out by then, and these Republican state legislatures in the states that, Republicans control the legislature, if these court cases are still ongoing, they're not going to certify the results of the elections, and they're not going to appoint anyone to the Electoral College. And if that's the case, then the only states that will appoint, representatives to the Electoral College, who will, appoint electors, will be states where we know the result already and that's not in dispute. And if you have less states appointing electors, I'm pretty sure you might not need 270 to win at that point. You might just need a majority of the electors present. I really would have to look up exactly in the Constitution. I should have done that. I should have looked in the part of the Constitution that deals with the Electoral College and see if you need exactly 270, which I don't think you do, because I'm pretty sure that the Electoral College didn't originally have 270 votes. I think that that's based on population, and that as or based on the number of states maybe. And because we've had 538 electoral votes for a very long time, I know that, and that as the population has increased, I don't think that we have gained electoral votes, at least in my lifetime, because you still need 270 win back 20 years ago in 2000. But anyway, I'm pretty sure that the way the Electoral College works is that the Electoral College will be able to pick a president as long as they're not tied. But either way, even if you need 270 and nobody gets to 270, which is quite possible, then the election will just be thrown to Congress, in which case, as I've discussed before, Republicans control the majority of the state delegations to the House of Representatives. They would be able to pick whoever they wanted, assuming that that's President Trump. And the way things are going right now, it looks like the congressional Republicans are backing Trump's effort. You have members of the Senate getting in line, and of course, most importantly, Steve Scalise, or well, not most importantly, but very importantly, Steve Scalise, the House Minority Whip, whose job it is to keep his party in line, came out and said the election is not over. We're not going to recognize Joe Biden as president yet. That is, if Steve Scalise is coming out and saying that, that is what, Republican congressmen are supposed to be towing. That's their line. And so I think it would be pretty odd if, all of this, went on and then it came down to the wire when Congress was, the ones deciding the next president if they don't pick Trump. I was unsure about that at first, but it seems to me more and more likely. Now that might change. A lot can still happen, and I think it's still we're a long way away from Congress even being close to deciding who the next president is, and I would be surprised, or I shouldn't say I'd be surprised, but I think it's not likely that we get to that point. We've got a long way to go, but I mean, it's important. A lot of people, all these people out there in the streets dancing and celebrating that Trump is gone, have no idea how any of this works. They don't understand that if states can't certify their elections because there's very clear and evident fraud and there's not time to have a revote before, or it doesn't make it that far in the courts before December the 14th, then the Electoral College could be deadlocked, or these states could not send electors to the Electoral College. And again, if you don't actually need 270, if you don't need a majority of the possible votes, for example, if the states that don't send electors, if their electors are removed from the denominator to where, let's say, Wisconsin doesn't send their 10 electors, that the 538 total Electoral College votes goes down to 528, well, then obviously there's a smaller, you need a smaller number to have a majority of that. I don't know if states not sending electors to the Electoral College affects the denominator. But if it does not, then, like I said, that will result in neither Trump nor Biden getting a majority in the Electoral College, just like in 1824, and it will be thrown to the House. That is the same scenario as what happens if you have a tie in the Electoral College. Now, if you don't need 270 and that number is removed from the denominator, well, then all these states that are right now in Biden's column being removed, and 0 red states, 0 Trump states being removed, could make it so that Trump actually is able to win outright in the Electoral College. Now, again, that would be a very startling turn of events. But these are, this is a possibility that we're looking at this point. I'm sure the Trump campaign has looked over all of these possibilities and war-gamed them all out and probably assigned them each probabilities. Because it's very clear from today that they're not going down without a fight. The Republicans in Congress, surprisingly, are not going down without a fight. The Republican National Committee is not going down without a fight. I'm shocked to say that. But the chairwoman of the RNC, Mitt Romney's niece, coming out today, sounding very strong. She, of course, is from Michigan. Mitt Romney's father, George Romney, I believe, was the governor of Michigan. Mitt Romney's kind of weird. He has 3 home states. And I believe he might have been born in Mexico, or maybe that was George that was born in Mexico. But anyway, Ronna Romney, McDaniel, whatever, I guess McDaniel's her married name, but she keeps the Romney name probably because of notoriety. I don't know. I wouldn't want my name to be Romney personally. If I were a woman and I got married, I would drop the Romney name like a hot potato. But anyway, she seems very concerned because of all this fraud going on in her own state, Michigan. Because if you don't deal with this right now, even though you get rid of Trump, well, then no other Republican's going to win in Michigan the next time either. You're not going to have John James, who I'm sure that, the RNC is very fond of. They would love to have a black Republican senator from a blue state. I mean, that'd just be a thumb in the nose to the Democrats on their identity politics stuff. Another interesting thing, the 2 GOP senators from Georgia who are both running for re-election, who will go into a runoff on January 5th, are calling for the, I believe, Republican Secretary of State of Georgia to resign. And he's in charge, of course, of running the elections. They're saying that, he allowed rampant fraud to persist and to, be perpetrated in their state. I assume they're talking about Fulton County, which is where Atlanta is. And, I'm impressed by that because, again, these people need to win on January 5th. They can't have all this fraud going on or else they're both going to lose. And not only will Arizona then have 2 Democratic senators, as they do now, one of which appears to have been stolen, Kyrsten Sinema's. It's unclear if Mark Kelly's was. But then the Democrats also might, because of Fulton County, if these problems are not resolved and they don't deal with this fraud issue, what appears to be a rampant fraud issue in Fulton County, Georgia, what was once a safe red state, just a couple months ago could have 2 Democratic senators as well. And so all of this has to be resolved, and it has to be resolved quickly. Now, again, we had this problem in Florida, and it was dealt with by Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis. They got rid of the bad apples, and our elections went very well in 2020. Georgia needs to do the same thing. Brian Kemp, who is a pathetic human being, done absolutely nothing. The Secretary of State done absolutely nothing. These 2 senators, up until now, looked pretty pathetic. They need to wake up. They need to realize that they have to fight to win. You can't just rely on people always voting for you and you always winning without fraud. You have to remove whoever runs the elections in Fulton County and perhaps other counties where there's fraud being committed. I've heard people say similar things about Savannah or Valdosta. I'm not sure to what extent those are true. I'm not from Georgia. I don't know if they have big fraud problems in those counties. And of course, Clark County, every 2 years, there's fraud in Clark County. That is just the nature of it. I mean, it was a mafia county for a very long time. I don't think that, from what I understand, the mob's probably not that powerful there anymore. But now you have the SEIU, Service Employees International Union, basically the mafia. Now, legally, I'm not sure what the president can say, that might not hurt his case, but I really wish that the lawyers would write him, would help his speechwriter plan something out that Trump can say, and he needs to not answer any questions and just speak completely off a teleprompter or read a paper or whatever, no ad-libbing so that he doesn't, screw something up in this case, even though I think that Trump is much better when he ad-libs on a political level, but I mean, just in terms of, you don't want to hurt your case. He needs to outline what their case is as much as he can publicly so that not only his supporters, but people who oppose him can see a little bit of what's going on. And I'm not saying that he's going to convince Biden supporters of what he's arguing in court here, but they at least need to realize that he's not going down without a fight. That we are in the Bush v. Gore scenario right now, times 10, and nobody's acknowledging it. Everyone's just acting like, oh yeah, Joe Biden's the next president. Like in 2000, would we have just acknowledged, oh yeah, George Bush is the next president, or yeah, Al Gore is the next president? No, people had no idea for 37 days who the president would be until the Supreme Court put the kibosh on it because they didn't want to get to the point to where we had a hung electoral college for the first time since, what was it, 1876? I think that the Congress had to decide the president then too. The Supreme Court didn't want to see that happen, and that's exactly what would happen if Al Gore kept litigating the case in Florida and kept that at the courts. Florida would not have been able to certify their vote and appointed electors to the Electoral College, and so therefore neither Bush nor Gore would have had a majority. And I believe... So the Supreme Court basically just said, no, we're done. We've done enough recounts. The Florida vote is good enough. And, I don't know if that was the right decision or not. A lot of people were upset by that. The Gore supporters certainly weren't happy. But, the only person from the Supreme Court who was, there in 2000, who's still there, I think there's 2 of them. I think it's just Breyer and Clarence Thomas. The rest, I'm pretty sure, will have all been appointed since then. Yeah, because he had 2 by Bush Jr., 2 by Obama, and then 3 by Trump. So we don't know necessarily how the rest of them will vote. I'm pretty sure that we know, well, I think that Alito will probably go the same way as Thomas. Kavanaugh seemed to endorse Rehnquist's position from 2000. I think that the wild cards here, we know that John Roberts is going to side with the left and the court. So the wild cards here really are Barrett and, to a lesser extent, Gorsuch. But, I mean, they are, Trump appointees, so, I mean, they do have that going for them. If I were on the left, again, I would not feel safe just thinking that one of them is going to break with the right of the court and go against Trump and try and help out Biden here, especially if the Trump administration actually has a good case. So again, this is a reason why, I'm not comfortable saying that, oh yeah, Trump will definitely win. But if I were on the left and I were a Biden supporter, I would not feel comfortable saying, oh yeah, Trump's definitely going to lose. I mean, that's just happy talk at this point. he still has a lot going for him. And I've been trying to catch as many of these press conferences as I can. I haven't caught every single one, but I'm going to try and keep up with it and try and keep up, keep following this every day, since a lot of people just seem to have given up on the election, and they're talking about, what a Biden administration will look like. And I can talk about that. I have a lot to say on that. And again, I don't like to do politics every day on this channel, but War and Peace is what more energizes me. But I would like to say something about a President Joe Biden if he does end up becoming it. But I have no confidence that he will become president still at this point. So with that said, if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button, sharing this video, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.